I live here in Cranbrook, British Columbia, Canada, and my wife and I and the supporters that are going to accompany me on this trek are going to go south from Cranbrook to Eastport, Idaho, to U.S. Customs. And I'm going to park my vehicle on this side of the U.S. border because I risk seizure of my vehicle. But then my wife and I are going to walk up to the customs office at Eastport, and I'm going to be asked if I can be allowed entry in the United States.
What is your motivation for trying to cross the United States border?
Well, I have two reasons, Mike, and first of all, it's personal. I have family in the United States. I have an American background, and it's my hope that I'll get the privilege to go see my sister and my two nephews and her husband. And the second motivation is that I found out that having HIV/AIDS bars me entry from the United States, and that's a social injustice. People living with HIV/AIDS face enough barriers, and we have enough stigmatization, and what the United States has chosen to do is make HIV/AIDS a legal issue when it's a disease, and I feel this is highly unreasonable, and therefore I'm a person that I feel I need to respond proactively to a social injustice of which I strongly believe this is. And therefore, I'm going to attempt to cross in the United States. But first and foremost, it's very personal. I have family, and I've not seen my sister. I've never met her. And we've talked on the telephone much, but it would be a real privilege if I could talk to her and meet her and have that closeness, if you will.
Richard, now you know the U.S. government is taking a hard line to your announcement. Why do you want to risk arrest?
I personally feel that, as I just stated, that people living with HIV and living with AIDS face enough stigmatization, and we have enough barriers just making it in society and in living in general. And for the United States government to enact such sweeping legislation to exclude people with HIV/AIDS from crossing the border, in my opinion, is a tremendous social injustice. HIV and AIDS is a disease. It's not a legal issue. And the United States has chosen to, by enacting this legislation, has criminalized AIDS. And we get penalized for crossing the border. And I feel that I need to make a proactive response to this and hopefully challenge the United States government. And maybe they'll respond with compassion rather than with condemnation.
What have they said that they're going to do to you when you do go to the border?
Well, there's a couple of scenarios. They could just politely say to me I can't cross and ask for myself to voluntarily go back to Canada. But I'm going to try and challenge them on this issue because apparently people with HIV/AIDS cross the border, so they've said, all the time. And I want to see, well, just because I'm legally declaring it, I want to know why I'm being denied the freedom, if you will, to cross. I'm not an AIDS terrorist. I'm not a disease terrorist. I'm not going down there to infect anyone. I'm not a threat to anyone. So I'm going to try and challenge them. And my understanding is that this could be construed as provocative, and I could risk arrest and face an immigration hearing and detention and then deportation to Canada. Depends on the Americans.
How far are you willing to go to bring attention to this issue?
I've come this far with this disease by God's grace, and I feel that I'm willing to risk the possibility of arrest and detention if it will bring greater public awareness to this issue and will challenge the U.S. government to think more compassionately to those living with HIV and AIDS. We don't need this. I don't need this. The bottom line, Mike, is that this is about freedom, basic freedom. And as a human citizen, I'm entitled to basic human, the basic human rights that we all are accorded. And that is the freedom to be oneself and the freedom to cross. And just because I have AIDS, I should not be denied entering the United States. What really burns me about this is that the United States has categorized AIDS with 3 other diseases, tuberculosis, smallpox, and the plague, those are highly airborne, communicable pathogens. And I don't want to minimize that AIDS is not a serious disease. It is. There's some serious concerns about it. However, it's not an airborne pathogen. And it seems like this legislation truly is turning us into the modern day lepers, just as leprosy was in the old days. People couldn't travel, their freedoms were taken away, they were restricted to colonies, they couldn't enter into cities. And here we have a modern day scenario. We have the very same thing happening over this disease. And I believe it's the only disease that fosters this kind of response from people who don't seem to have the understanding and the empathy. We are the modern day lepers. And it's my hope that by taking this action, maybe I can affect change for the better. Maybe this action will create enough public awareness that maybe U.S. Congress and the American citizens will take a look at individuals, people like me, and realize that that's just what we are. We are people. We are not lepers. We're not disease terrorists. We're not to be put away or to be put to sleep or be put on islands and isolated from society. We're a part of society. AIDS is here to stay. But to tag us and label us and then to deny us that contact, the most basic human need is the need to belong and the need to interact with other human beings, particularly one's family, should not be bound up in these by a border and another country's idea of what this is all about. I understand their concern, but at the same time, it's I'm not going to add to the I've lost it, Mike. Sorry. I'm not, as it says in the paper. I'm not an AIDS terrorist. I'm not going to create any more problems for them. We, as far as I know, in Canada, we do not treat Americans when they come into Canada with HIV/AIDS the same way. I understand that should I cross without telling them the truth, without being responsible, that if I'm found down there and I have a medical emergency and they find my AIDS medications, I'm subject to arrest, I'm subject to a charge, and I'm subject to deportation and forever denied entry back in the United States. I feel this is a tremendous social injustice. I also risk, if I go over in my vehicle, I risk forfeiture of my vehicle to the United States government. I'm willing to challenge them on this. I don't believe it's right. I don't believe it's morally right. And I'm going to try and make a difference.
If you had to say something to the U.S. Attorney General right now, what would it be, Richard?
I would like to say to Attorney General Janet Reno that, and to Senator Jesse Helms, whom I know is a Christian man, and I'm a Christian as well. I'm hoping that as you watch this, that you will think of people like me, particularly, I have an American background, but that shouldn't make a difference, but that you will think of people like us in compassion, and that you would maybe look at your laws and look at how restrictive and repressive they are and how they stigmatize and marginalize individuals such as myself in the HIV/AIDS community. And I hope that you will be moved to rethink your position and to rethink that law through. See, Thursday will be celebration. His best friend was like, remember that picture I showed you north? Mm-hmm. That's where he's at.
Oh, yeah.
But things are moving up because Alberta's become not HIV friendly again. They're not giving the extra supports that BC's giving. So we got a massive influx of HIV/AIDS patients coming back to BC. But Martin and Rob were helping move. They're going to stay with us for a couple of months. And we'll get their own place here. But they got family here. His mom's here. His partner's mom's here. Mm-hmm. So I just heard, because his partner had a viral load that's not very healthy. And they just said, because Rob just phoned, and I think this whole thing about hope, because his viral loads have gone down to 70-some thousand. He's been on the same meds for a year and a half, so hope does translate into health. And I'm still undetectable, Mike. The latest news, saw Dr. Brown 2 days ago and talked to Dr. Conway again and said they're baffled. They can't explain it. And look at me. I'm healthy. See, I am, of all men, really so blessed. And I don't know why, because I don't deserve it. See, and January, Christmas in January, Mike, they tell me to make this a good year. And it's being a real good year now, to date. It's like, you know, Phyllis and I went through this whole thing in January, making the will, preparing for dying, and then you get this new lease, if you will, or this whole new, how do you want to say it? This whole new, it's like I wake up every morning, I don't even think I'm sick. You know, it's like maybe some nightmare, and it's like I'm gonna wake up and then, but you get this whole new sense of freedom, and you start, I can plan ahead, you know. It's still one day at a time, but you start planning ahead. And before I was losing that, and I'll be honest with you, I never told you this, but I was thinking of suicide again in January. But the thoughts come, you can't seem to help it, right? I don't think I would have acted on it, but... And now I just got all this glorious wonderment. You know what?
The Cranbrook A.I.D.S Society fully supports Mr. Hollingsworth in his walk to the border, and we do not agree with the American law on criminalizing people with HIV/AIDS. Criminalization of any illness is wrong in the view of the Cranbrook A.I.D.S Society, and this is in accordance with international health organizations such as the World Health Organization and AIDS service organizations internationally, including American ones such as MFAR. We're with Mr. Hollingsworth morally and spiritually, and although people from the Cranbrook A.I.D.S Society won't be physically with Mr. Hollingsworth at the border due to limited staffing, we will be with him morally and spiritually, and we very much hope that if he goes to the Spokane jail, that he will not be harmed in any way, because that would compound the issue of people with HIV/AIDS who are suffering unnecessarily from unjust laws and unjust treatment and discrimination worldwide. For anyone living with AIDS out there, whether it's in East Kootenay or in Canada or the United States, it's important that they recognize that they have an illness, and that they don't have to be afraid, that it's something which they can get help for, and all AIDS service organizations support that and support them fully. And that's what this is all about.
A waiver form, or to say that you cannot enter because of HIV/AIDS or any other disease except regular fever. Well, they cannot even ask or make that an issue. HIV/AIDS should not be an issue, and I should not even have to, even though they can ask for it because they're a country. It is a clear violation of the agreement and the treaty that the United Nations put together, of which the United States is a member. It's a clear violation of basic fundamental human rights. Now, the suggestion to me was, I'm not going to be provocative at the border, the local border incident, but when they... Exactly. And instead, what I'm going to do when I go there, they're going to ask, because finally the U.S. government phoned our local newspaper here, they're going to demand a waiver form from me. But I've been advised to refuse the waiver because it's a violation of fundamental human rights plus the Privacy Act as well. Also touches and infringes on basic privacy issues around HIV/AIDS. Instead, I'm going to politely ask, I do not want to speak to a U.S. Customs Inspector, but I want to speak to the highest ranking senator. And I'm going to camp out on the doorstep until I get one. Okay? Right at the border, right in front of their border crossing, just right on the Canadian soil side, there's a yeah. That way I'm not violating, I'm not provoking. I've got some real good signs. Professionally made about this whole issue, and I won't move from there until I can see a U.S. senator. There's a couple that we have in mind. Northwest AIDS Coalition for Washington. Guys, ride this way. Ride your bike this way.
My wife. I can enjoy my wife.
I just, and yeah, Kayla and Holly and Matt, they start calling me Dad. Holly still calls me Victor now. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And I got my first Father's Day card.
Baboon.
Baboon? What do you call me baboon for?
Richard, now that you're living with HIV here in Canada, do you normally break the law?
No, I don't. I try to live my life as responsibly as possible, and I'm not an advocate of civil disobedience. However, I feel that this law demands a radical response, and if it takes my walking to the border and being somewhat provocative and challenging with the U.S. authorities in the hopes that maybe a different kind of response will be done and a change for the better may happen, then I'm willing to take that risk. And I don't feel in my heart that I'm being civilly disobedient. It's a law that needs to be taken off the books. So
when they do arrest you, and it looks like they're going to, are you prepared to spend some time in a U.S. jail, and do you have the wherewithal to get out of that jail?
Well, I'm prepared in my heart to spend time, if I have to, in the United States prison. It's my hope that it won't come to this. I don't have the funds or the wherewithal to post bail if that is necessary, or a bond. But it's my hope that the United States government will act in compassion, because I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm not coming down as a terrorist or to hurt anybody down there. I'm coming down there because I believe this is a violation of my basic human and civil rights, and so I'm hoping that there will be a compassionate response there as well, and that we can cooperate through the legal process that I'm going to have to find myself intertwined with, and hopefully we can resolve this with through the courts with a happy ending.
Have you spoken to any legal people in Canada here to tell you what your options are?
Well, I have spoken with some preliminary. I've had some preliminary talks with legal representation here, and I've touched base with some legal representation in the United States, and we're not sure of my rights under the Constitution for the United States and for Canada as yet, but certainly my rights as a human being under the UN, because the United Nations and the World Health Organization has condemned this exclusionary law that the United States has enacted to keep people with HIV/AIDS out of their country. And I'm hoping that through the United Nations Human Rights Commission that I can challenge the U.S. on this, and I guess I'm setting a precedent. I'm going to set a precedent here and be a test case under the the UN Human Rights Commission and through their tribunal process. So I'm willing to give it a shot. The United States has an option. When I phoned U.S. Immigration in Blaine, Washington, I was told by an inspector there that I could apply for a special waiver to enter the United States. But in his experience, he said, he told me, that these waivers in over 90% of the cases are generally denied and only granted in two situations. One of extreme dire emergency, say my sister were to have a heart attack or something, and I could apply for it, but there's a process, and who knows, my sister could be dead by then. Or if there was a special conference, like an AIDS conference on, and I was a delegate to that conference. Well, I think that's ludicrous. Why should I have to apply for a waiver? People with heart disease and cancer and epilepsy and influenza, they don't have to go through this process. So here I am, I'm stigmatized because I have HIV/AIDS. I can't even cross, so this has literally become more than just a border, it's a barrier right here that divides Canada and the U.S., and it's not just an imaginary line, it's now become a barrier, and not only that, I have to go and apply for a special waiver, and the odds don't appear to be in my favor. At least that's what I've been told by U.S. Immigration in Blaine, Washington. I think it's really sad that I'm living with enough of the mistakes of my past. I can't undo those, and I'm trying to live my life more responsibly. And this is not about sympathy. I don't want sympathy from people. I'm just talking the bottom line that the basic thing here is freedom. The freedom to be me and the freedom to be who I am with this disease. And to put me into this categorization and to criminalize and penalize me for having a disease, I think is atrocious. And it's a sad commentary on our modern society. I'd just like to once again appeal to the American public and to the government of the United States, to President Clinton, and to the United States Congress, that you would consider this law that you've enacted to exclude people with HIV/AIDS from Canada from entering your country, that you would pray and search your hearts and think of us living here with HIV/AIDS and those in your own country living with HIV/AIDS as people, and people to be treated with dignity and with respect and with compassion. And that we are people, and in spite of our disease and the setbacks that we face as a result of it, we do have something to offer society, and we have much to give. And it's my hope that you will consider that, and consider how this law hurts us emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. Oh, there is one other concern. Jerry Warner heard there was a rumor going around that the Idaho militia or Ku Klux Klan are Aryan nations, but there's lunatics everywhere. There could be a risk to my life. Let's tell you about that. I'm not a martyr, Mike.
How real do you think the threats are?
Well, the threats from those people out there that feel that those of us living with HIV/AIDS should be removed right off the face of the earth are very real. I've had threats against my life in the past, even here in Canada, from Canadians, and we're a country known for our compassion towards people. So, but there are factions, there are people, and I'm not saying that this, I'm not painting all of the American public this way, but there are those fringe elements in society that feel that people like myself pose a threat to their milieu. Therefore, they'd be willing to even take out my life, or people like myself to kill us. And it's my hope that none of of that element or that fringe part of society will do any harm to me. And so it's a concern. I prayed about it, and I'm trusting in God, but I'm not a martyr. I don't want to. I think that would be awful, should something like that happen. But it's a concern. It's been communicated to me, so I have to take that into consideration. I have a wife and I have children, and
Holly or Kayla.
I want to be here for a while. I want to live a while longer, God willing.
See? See, hon? Are you okay, hon? You okay?
Richard, how'd you like to introduce your friend?
This is my friend Martin, who is another individual living with AIDS, and Martin just moved here recently from Alberta to British Columbia. And it's amazing, and I'm very grateful that I have the support of the citizens in Cranbrook in general. But Martin here is another individual who's affected by this exclusionary law of the United States, and Martin is going to accompany my wife and my other supporters with me to the U.S. border as well. Martin?
Yeah, it's like you say, I didn't even know this law existed if you hadn't mentioned that. And it's like, I feel that because of this law, just because I've got a terminally ill disease, I feel like I'm being treated as a criminal. And I don't think that's fair. Like people with heart conditions or leukemia or cancer, that they don't get treated this way. Why should we? We don't spread our disease any more than they do, unless you're being promiscuous with somebody. I mean, just because you talk to somebody or go into a restaurant isn't no threat to anybody. Like I don't feel like I'm any more threat than anybody else is.
People like myself with living with HIV/AIDS are paying a very terrible price and consequence by having this disease, and it's very it's a terrible loneliness and isolating disease, and I feel that's enough of a price to pay, and then to add insult to injury by excluding people like Martin and myself and others living with HIV/AIDS here in Canada from entering into another country is just adding insult to injury. And it's my hope that the action I'm about to undertake this Friday will start a process whereby maybe I can affect a change for the better, and maybe it'll challenge others out there to respond with a proactive, not sympathetic, but empathetic response to this issue, and treat us with the dignity and accord us the respect that I feel that we're entitled to. And so once again, that's what my hope is, that we have this hope. And I don't need to be a prisoner in my own country. I'm already a prisoner in my body because of this disease, and I don't want to be a prisoner in society.